Welcome back to another gripping episode of The Success Mindset, where we bring you stories of ambition, betrayal, survival, and the relentless pursuit of purpose. Our audience spans across the globe, and we thank you for being with us once again. Take a moment wherever you are in the world to settle in and prepare yourself for a tale that weaves family, loyalty, and vengeance into a tapestry as fragile as it is explosive. Today, we invite you into the life of Vaughn Mercer, a man whose carefully constructed world unraveled in the most shocking of ways, forcing him to confront not only his past, but the very shadows that threatened his daughter's future. Chapter 1. Birthday Surprise. Vaughn Mercer held the cream-colored invitation between his fingers, his thumb brushing across the embossed lettering as if the texture itself might change what the words declared. Natalie's 35th birthday celebration. His ex-wife, the woman he had once loved with the conviction of a soldier trusting his weapon, was hosting a party at the sprawling lake house that had once represented their shared dream. That home, nestled by the still waters and framed with cedar warmth, had been where they celebrated 5 anniversaries, where laughter once filled the air, where plans for a future had taken shape. Now, stripped of its rustic charm, it belonged to Natalie and the man she had married just 8 months after signing divorce papers, Bradley Hoffman. Lily Vaughn's 7-year-old daughter packed her overnight bag with quiet diligence. She looked up at him with eyes older than her years, eyes that had seen too much of the tension between her parents. "You don't have to go, Dad," she said softly, her tone carrying the weight of an adult in a child's frame. "I can tell Mom you had to work." Vaughn lowered himself to her level, looking at her with the kind of fierce gentleness only a father who had already lost too much could muster. "And miss dropping you off? Never. Besides, your mom and I agreed to be civil for your sake." He did not voice the rest, the darker truth that he would endure humiliation, hostility, or worse, just to remain close to Lily. The custody arrangement already felt like a cruel compromise. Every other weekend and midweek dinners were fragments of fatherhood he clung to with desperation. As his Audi turned onto the long private drive, the lake house appeared ahead, but it was no longer the house he remembered. Where once cedar had glowed warmly against the setting sun, sterile white paint now glared, cold and uninviting. Inside, sleek furnishings had replaced the homey touches that once defined it. Vaughn's stomach twisted as cars filled the circular driveway, some belonging to friends and family who had all, in the aftermath of divorce, chosen sides. None had chosen his. Lily noticed his jaw tightening and whispered, "Bradley doesn't like when you come inside." Vaughn forced a neutral expression, though rage simmered beneath it. "That's Bradley's problem, isn't it?" Inside, Natalie greeted their daughter with a brightness that dimmed the instant her eyes fell on Vaughn. She was beautiful as always, her form-fitting dress and styled hair painting the picture of success, but the falter in her smile betrayed something else. "I didn't expect you to come in," she said curtly. Vaughn handed Lily's bag to her mother, offering a clipped, "Happy birthday." Before Natalie could respond, her parents, Theodore and Diana Keller, appeared. Their disdain for their former son-in-law was unmistakable, their expressions tightening like fists. Behind them, Bradley emerged, his arm claiming Natalie's waist with possessive arrogance. "What a surprise," Theodore said with thinly veiled contempt. Diana added, loud enough for Vaughn to hear, "Hardly a welcome one." Bradley smirked, asking bluntly, "Why are you even here?" as Theodore and Diana laughed in unison. The tension rippled through the room, but Vaughn had been hardened by years of facing down warlords and criminals across the globe as a private security specialist. Yet this dismissal, delivered not with bullets, but with mockery, cut deeper than he cared to admit. He steadied himself until Lily's small voice pierced the hostility. "Dad's bringing me to Mom's party," she said firmly, pressing closer to him. Bradley crouched, sugar dripping from his voice. "Sweetie, why don't you go find the other kids?" "They're in the game room." But Lily clung tighter to Vaughn's hand. Her grip was urgent, her eyes wide with genuine fear. She whispered, "Dad, we need to leave. Something's wrong." The room grew silent as Vaughn looked into his daughter's eyes. There it was, not childish anxiety, but true, bone-deep fear. "We'll skip the party after all," he said evenly. "Seems Lily isn't feeling up to it." Natalie moved forward, concern flashing across her face, but Bradley cut her off, dismissing Lily's fear as attention-seeking. Vaughn felt his daughter's small fingers dig into his palm. He had learned long ago to trust instinct, and right now every instinct screamed danger. "We're leaving," he declared. Theodore stepped toward him, fists clenched, but Vaughn's focus shifted. Across the room, near the bar, a stranger with a scar traced down his face watched with unnatural intensity. He wasn't part of Natalie's circle. Vaughn filed his presence away like a red flag. Guiding Lily to the car, Vaughn barely had time to ask what frightened her before she whispered, "I heard Bradley and that man with the scar in the study. They said they were going to take care of loose ends tonight. They said your name Vaughn's grip tightened on the steering wheel as headlights bloomed behind them. A black SUV surged into his rear view, accelerating deliberately." Chapter 2. Dead Drops and Revelations. The SUV followed them with just enough distance to suggest surveillance rather than aggression, but Vaughn knew the tactic well. Too well. This was a maneuver he himself had employed countless times during his 12 years with Sentinel Security Group before founding his own consultancy. Calmly, he instructed Lily to lie on the floor behind his seat, his voice steady even as his pulse surged. "Are the bad men following us?" she asked, her voice astonishingly calm. "Just being cautious," he answered, taking a sharp turn. The SUV mirrored his every move. Confirmation. For 20 minutes, Vaughn drove like a man trained to survive, weaving, doubling back, searching for a defensible location. Finally, he guided the car into the underground garage of an office complex belonging to his old ally, Dominic Rizzo. The space was empty. Dominic was away on business, but Vaughn had access. He rushed Lily upstairs into the fortified office, disabling the alarm with practiced ease. "Uncle Dom's not here?" she asked, wide-eyed. Vaughn reassured her, pulling up surveillance feeds that confirmed the SUV had not followed them inside. For now, they were safe. Kneeling in front of his daughter, Vaughn asked her to recount everything she had heard. Her fragmented account was chilling. Bradley and the scarred man had been discussing offshore accounts, an accelerated timeline, and Vaughn himself as a problem to be handled. They had mentioned a woman named Porsche, someone Bradley feared was suspicious and who might talk to Vaughn. The name landed like a fist to his chest. Porsche Devereux, Natalie's best friend, the only one who had ever reached out to Vaughn after the divorce. Months ago, she had hinted at hidden truths, promising proof she never delivered. Vaughn had dismissed it then as gossip. Now, with Porsche's name surfacing in the same breath as his elimination, he realized his mistake. When Lily fell asleep on the office couch, Vaughn began digging. His searches peeled back layers of carefully constructed lies. Bradley Hoffman's background was riddled with inconsistencies, his identity appearing only after 2015. Vaughn's instinct screamed, manufactured cover. More disturbing still, Theodore Keller's financial history revealed federal investigations into suspicious transactions. Both mysteriously closed, the lead investigators retired or transferred under peculiar circumstances. The deeper Vaughn dug, the clearer the pattern became, a conspiracy stretching into powerful institutions. At midnight, a text alert from an unknown number froze him. Porsche Devereux found dead. Apparent suicide, police involved. Watch yourself. Vaughn's blood chilled. The only possible sender was a former colleague monitoring police channels. Portia was dead, silenced. The stakes crystallized. He made 3 calls to his sister, Renee, arranging for Lily's protection in a remote cabin, to his attorney, documenting custody arrangements in case of retaliation, and to a trusted associate specializing in deep background investigations. By dawn, Lily was safely hidden, and Vaughn stood alone in his condo, pulling a Glock 19 from his old go bag. Natalie's furious voicemails blared on his phone, accusing him of kidnapping. He deleted them with cold finality. The rules of his life had changed. Portia had been murdered. He was next, but unlike her, Vaughn was not an easy target. Chapter 3. The Devil's Ledger rain hammered the roof of the abandoned waterfront warehouse as Vaughn waited, concealed behind rotting pallets. His watch read 2:37 a.m. Franklin Wells was late, 20 minutes late. That was unusual for the man once nicknamed Clockwork in their Sentinel days, a CIA analyst known for precision. A delay meant complications. Finally, the heavy door creaked open and Wells slipped in, cautious, rain dripping from his coat. "You look like hell," Wells muttered, by way of greeting. Vaughn exhaled a humorless laugh. 3 days of digging through nightmares will do that. Tell me you found something. Wells placed a waterproof case between them. "I found the Devil's Ledger." He explained what he had uncovered. Bradley Hoffman was a ghost, an identity constructed after 2015. His true name was Preston Rayburn, a financial operations specialist tied to a shadowy private military contractor called Obsidian Solutions Group. Theodore Keller, Natalie's father, had been the banking connection, laundering their money through Heritage Trust. Vaughn's stomach hardened as the puzzle assembled. Natalie, Wells continued, was entangled far more deeply than Vaughn had imagined. Whether victim or willing participant remained unclear. The ledger contained everything: account numbers, shell companies, identities. Enough to bury them all. Portia's death, Wells added, was no suicide. The medical examiner noted defensive wounds. Vaughn had suspected as much. Hearing it confirmed ignited a furnace inside him. And there was more. Obsidian was preparing for something big. Offshore transfers, false identities, even passports for Natalie and Lily under new names. Vaughn's jaw clenched. They were planning to disappear with his daughter. Among the files lay a dossier on the scarred man Lily had described, Malcolm Reeves, Obsidian's head of security, a former Special Forces operator with a reputation for brutal efficiency. Wells handed Vaughn a flash drive containing security footage from Portia's apartment building. Reeves entering before midnight, leaving just after. Her death window was within that time. Vaughn pocketed it, his resolve hardening to steel. "Disappear, Franklin," he warned. "Take that vacation to New Zealand you're always talking about." Wells nodded grimly, already aware of the danger. Alone again in the warehouse, Vaughn reviewed the evidence. Offshore accounts, arms dealing, political connections, surveillance photos of Lily, proof they had been watching her, preparing to use her as leverage. Dawn seeped through the cracks as Vaughn made a vow. They would not face justice in courtrooms. They would face him, and he would not be swift. He would not be merciful. Chapter 4. First Blood. The Oakmont Country Club was alive with the murmur of polished conversation, the faint strains of live jazz mingling with the clinking of glasses and the scent of expensive cigars. It was an evening designed for the city's elite to parade their wealth under the guise of philanthropy, a place where secrets were whispered beneath the cover of charity and where Vaughn Mercer slipped like a ghost through the crowd, blending into the opulence while keeping his eyes trained on the man who had once been his father-in-law. Theodore Keller sat at a corner table in the cigar lounge, the dim light catching the edge of his whiskey glass as he laughed with 3 other men, their cheeks ruddy with alcohol and arrogance. Vaughn positioned himself at the bar, using the reflective bottles as a mirror. For 40 minutes he listened, his device capturing every word as Theodore boasted of a Shanghai deal, Another $30 million routed through Cayman accounts, brushing aside concerns from a compliance officer named Scott Levinson. Vaughn's patience was unwavering, his expression unreadable, his posture casual enough to disarm suspicion while his mind calculated every implication. The moment shifted when the bartender placed a bourbon before him, gesturing toward the end of the bar. Vaughn turned and found himself staring directly into the scarred face of Malcolm Reeves. The enforcer of Obsidian, the man Lily had described, sat with deliberate calm, his eyes cold, assessing, and amused. Their gazes locked, a silent exchange of challenge, predator recognizing predator. Vaughn accepted the drink, lifted it in acknowledgement, then moved to take the seat beside Reeves. "Bold move," Vaughn said quietly, his voice even, "approaching me in public." Reeves sipped his whiskey and replied with measured detachment, "Professional courtesy." One operator to another, "I've reviewed your file. Impressive work in Tehran and Bogota." Vaughn leaned back, every muscle coiled, though his tone betrayed none of it. "I'm retired." Reeves smirked, shaking his head. "No one like you ever retires. Men like us simply change employers." The conversation unfolded with the rhythm of two men circling in the shadows of their shared expertise. Reeves made no effort to deny his surveillance of Lily, calling it insurance. He spoke of Natalie and her value to interests beyond Vaughn's comprehension, of Portia's death as an unfortunate business necessity, as if eliminating her was no more consequential than erasing a number on a ledger. Vaughn's restraint was ironclad, his words a low warning. "Threaten my daughter again and they won't find enough of you to identify." Reeves smirked, unbothered, tossing money onto the bar. "This is your only warning. Next time won't be a conversation." He walked away, leaving Vaughn alone with the sound of his own heartbeat, the faint laughter of Theodore's group, and the taste of inevitability. When Theodore left for the restroom, Vaughn followed, his reflection looming in the gilded mirrors of the ornate bathroom. "What the hell are you doing here?" Theodore snapped, his face paling when Vaughn spoke. Calmly, deliberately, Vaughn listed what he knew. Obsidian, the laundering through Heritage Trust, the plan to disappear with Natalie and Lily. Theodore blustered, denying, then faltered. Vaughn pressed harder, invoking Portia's name, forcing him to reveal his guilt not with confession but with fear. "I'm not interested in legal justice," Vaughn said flatly. Theodore scoffed, masking terror with cruelty, finally sneering. "Natalie never loved you. You were useful, nothing more. She married you on my instruction. Your function was cover, legitimacy. And Lily? She was an unfortunate complication." Vaughn stood, his expression unchanged, though the words sliced at his insides. "If you try to take my daughter, I'll dismantle everything you've built," he promised. Theodore sneered again, but Vaughn showed his phone, the recording of their conversation already distributed to secure servers, with instructions to release to the FBI, Interpol, and the Wall Street Journal should anything happen to him or Lily. Theodore's fury was a mask for his defeat. Vaughn left him there, shaking, a man suddenly realizing the rules of his empire had shifted. That night, Scott Levinson received an anonymous package. Inside lay irrefutable evidence of Theodore's crimes, a dossier meticulously prepared to ensure federal attention. At the same time, Reeves returned to his apartment to find his accounts emptied, his server breached, his identity erased, and the words "First Warning" scrawled across his mirror in shaving cream. Vaughn had drawn the first blood, and the hunt was now fully underway. Chapter 5. The hourglass turns. Morning light spilled through the blinds of Vaughn's safe house as he reviewed the reports from his network. Heritage Trust was collapsing under federal scrutiny, their offices stormed by agents, Theodore escorted out in handcuffs, his reputation dismantled. Vaughn's phone buzzed. A message from his sister. "Lily safe. No unusual activity. She misses you." Relief flickered before he returned to focus. Theodore's arrest would force Obsidian to accelerate, their timeline shrinking by the hour. He switched on the television, the news dominated by allegations of international laundering and arms dealing. Vaughn's second phone buzzed, the one he kept powered off except for brief checks. 17 missed calls from Natalie, 3 from Bradley, and a voicemail from his attorney. The message confirmed his expectation. Natalie and Bradley had filed emergency custody modifications, accusing him of kidnapping, securing a temporary order demanding Lily's return. Natalie's voicemail followed, her voice calm, calculated. She framed herself as the reasonable parent, insisting she only wanted what was best for Lily, urging Vaughn to bring her home. But the tone, measured, manipulative, practiced, only confirmed what Theodore had revealed. Natalie had never been who she seemed. She had been molded into a weapon, her affection a facade, her marriage a mission. Vaughn deleted the messages, replacing sentiment with resolve. A knock at the door signaled the arrival of Gabriella Costa, a former intelligence analyst turned private investigator. She set her laptop on the table, observing Vaughn's gaunt features. "You look terrible," she remarked. He shrugged, already focused on the data. Gabriella revealed that in 48 hours, Natalie had liquidated $2 million, funneling it through shells until it landed in a Cayman account under Blue Horizon Ventures, an Obsidian subsidiary. Bradley, meanwhile, had arranged calls to a private airfield, accelerating their departure from Friday to tomorrow night. The timeline had shrunk again. Vaughn's pulse quickened, but his expression remained composed. Worse still, Malcolm Reeves had gone dark, assembling a team of killers. Gabriella showed photos of hardened men, former operatives already moving into the city. Vaughn absorbed it all, then leaned forward as Gabriella pulled up something more damning. Years of emails between Bradley and Theodore, revealing how Vaughn had been targeted from the beginning. They had studied him like prey, noting his orphanhood, his career insecurity, his vulnerabilities. They had instructed Natalie to marry him as cover, to sustain the facade long enough to use him for operational legitimacy. Vaughn read the clinical assessment of his life, each line a dissection of his heart. The marriage had been a strategy, Lily an error. His entire life with Natalie had been a lie constructed by men who saw his devotion as a weakness. Gabriella's final file was even darker. Contingency plans for eliminating him if he ever became problematic. Vaughn leaned back, absorbing the truth, not with despair, but with a chilling clarity. His only real achievement from that false marriage was Lily. Everything else had been ashes dressed as love. He looked at Gabriella and said, "I need to see Natalie face to face." Gabriella warned him it was a trap, that Reeves would use it to hunt him. Vaughn's reply was simple, "I'm counting on it." Chapter 6. Betrayal's Price. The private airfield gleamed under harsh security lights, guards patrolling its perimeter with military precision, their weapons carried with the ease of men trained for war. Vaughn lay concealed in the tree line, counting 6 men outside and 8 more heat signatures within the hangar, where a Gulfstream G650 waited. Gabriella's voice whispered through his earpiece, reporting Bradley and Natalie's arrival, their convoy surrounded by armed escorts. She asked about Reeves, but he was nowhere visible, which made him more dangerous. Vaughn knew Reeves would be orchestrating from the shadows, waiting to strike. But Vaughn had no intention of storming the hangar. He had already set Phase 3 in motion. Across the city, federal agents raided Obsidian's front companies. Police stormed Reeves's safe house. News outlets simultaneously published files exposing Bradley, Theodore, and Obsidian. Vaughn had seeded chaos into their foundation, and now he watched as panic spread through the airfield. Bradley stumbled from the hangar, shouting into his phone, his body language frantic. Vaughn smiled grimly. Perfect timing. While their focus remained on the aircraft, Vaughn slipped toward the administrative building, a softer target. Inside, he neutralized a lone technician and seized control of the communication system, the cameras, and most importantly, the fuel management system. Within minutes, the facility fell into confusion as alarms triggered. Communication lines collapsed, and the jet stood helpless without fuel. Vaughn watched from the feeds as Bradley and Natalie were pulled back from the plane, just as federal helicopters roared overhead, their spotlights bathing the runway in stark white. The carefully planned escape had unraveled. In the chaos, Vaughn moved unseen into the hangar. He placed charges at the fuel reserves, not to destroy but to deny, ensuring the plane would never leave. That was when Natalie's voice cut through the shadows. She stood with a pistol trained on him, her expression taut with conflict. "I should have known it was you," she said. Vaughn turned slowly, measuring her every movement. She spoke of survival, of her father's control, of Obsidian's reach, insisting she had loved Lily even if everything else was false. Vaughn countered with quiet ferocity, dismantling her excuses. He revealed that her father had already betrayed Bradley for witness protection, that Bradley would spend life in prison, that Obsidian was collapsing even as they stood there. Natalie's eyes flickered with something that looked like fear, maybe regret. Vaughn offered her one chance: put down the gun, cooperate, and at least give Lily a memory that wasn't poisoned by betrayal. Tears welled as she trembled, her voice cracking. "Tell her I loved her," she whispered as agents stormed in. Vaughn watched silently as she surrendered, her weapon clattering to the floor. Outside, Bradley screamed as he was taken into custody, his empire disintegrating around him. Vaughn stood in the wreckage, victorious, but the triumph was hollow. He had saved Lily from abduction, destroyed Obsidian's grip, and exposed their crimes. Yet the cost was immeasurable. Natalie was revealed as a fraud. Her love, her marriage, their life together, all of it a mask. And Lily would one day have to face that truth. Vaughn's war had saved his daughter, but it had also stolen the innocence of her family. And in the darkness of that moment, one enemy still slipped unseen into the night: Malcolm Reeves. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. Chapter 7: Ashes and Shadows. 3 months had passed since the raid at the airfield, yet the echoes of that night lingered in every corner of Vaughn Mercer's new life. The world outside might have seen triumph: Theodore Keller testifying in exchange for leniency, Bradley, Preston Rayburn, awaiting a life sentence, Natalie in custody providing information that peeled back the final layers of Obsidian's corruption. But inside Vaughn's own walls, the air was thick with unease. He met with Assistant U.S. Attorney Sophia Mendez, a woman driven by the weight of justice, but also shadowed by the dangers of handling intelligence too explosive to fully expose. She told him plainly that threats against Natalie had already materialized, 2 attempts in a single month. She had been relocated, hidden deeper under new names and layers of protection. Vaughn listened, but the information stirred no sympathy. He thought only of Lily, of the lies Natalie had lived, of the role she had played in turning his family into an operation. Mendes offered witness protection for him and his daughter, a chance to vanish and rebuild under new identities. Vaughn shook his head. He would not live in exile. He would not teach Lily to hide. "Reeves will surface eventually," he told her, "and when he does, I'll be ready." Lily stayed with Renee, Vaughn's sister, and together they built fragile routines. Vaughn visited often, each reunion marked by Lily running into his arms, her joy a balm against the scars carved into their lives. A golden retriever puppy joined the family, Lily's laughter returning piece by piece as she tumbled through the grass with her new companion. Vaughn bought a new house, one designed like a fortress, a modernist structure perched on a hill with clear lines of sight in all directions. Panic rooms, surveillance systems, redundancies, everything built with the precision of a man who knew the dangers that stalked him. Yet even within those secure walls, He sometimes felt the prickle of being watched, and then the message came. On a cool autumn evening, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. She has her eyes. Central Park Playground, yellow jacket. Tuesday, 3 p.m. Attached was a photo of Lily at school, the image fresh, her bright coat unmistakable. Vaughn's blood turned cold. It was Reeves. The implication was clear. I can reach her anywhere. He called his surveillance team, fury boiling when they swore no one had breached the perimeter. Reeves had infiltrated the system, his reach extending into Vaughn's most guarded sanctuaries. The meeting was a trap, of course, but Vaughn could not ignore it. He would not cede control. He would set the trap himself. Chapter 8. Predator and Prey. For 3 days, Vaughn prepared, moving Lily and Renee to a location known only to him, surrounding Central Park with an invisible security net of trusted operatives, scanning every possible ambush point. On the appointed day, he altered his appearance, subtle changes enough to obscure recognition, and approached from an unexpected direction. At precisely 3 o'clock, a man in a yellow jacket sat on a bench near the playground. Vaughn studied him from a distance. He was no Reeves. His gait, his movements, his build were wrong. A proxy. Vaughn moved in cautiously, settling beside him. The man slid an envelope across the bench, muttering, "He said you'd come." Said you wouldn't risk your daughter, Vaughn's instincts screamed. He pulled back just as the man's hand darted toward his pocket. A syringe gleamed, then plunged into the man's own thigh as Vaughn knocked his arm aside. The man convulsed, gasping. He said it wouldn't hurt you. He said it was just to make you sleep. Within seconds, he was dead. Poison burning through his veins. Parents screamed, dragging children away, chaos erupting. Vaughn's team converged, but Reeves's plan was clear. Eliminate the messenger, deliver the message, leave Vaughn with nothing but another body. Inside the envelope was a photograph of Natalie in her witness protection location, a newspaper in her hands marking yesterday's date. Across the image, scrawled in ink, were the words, "She's next, then you, then Lily will be alone, just like you were." Vaughn's breath turned to ice. Reeves had accessed his full background, his childhood orphanhood, his every wound cataloged and weaponized. This was no longer a professional vendetta. It was psychological warfare, a campaign to dismantle Vaughn piece by piece. He called Mendes, his voice flat. "Reeves has compromised her location. Move her immediately. You have a leak in witness security. Trust no one until you find it." He ended the call before she could protest. Reeves had crossed a line, and Vaughn knew that only a direct confrontation would end it. 72 hours of relentless pursuit led Vaughn to the outskirts of Pittsburgh, to an abandoned steel mill where Reeves had taken refuge. Surveillance confirmed 4 heat signatures, rotating patrols, cameras watching every approach. But storms had knocked out power, creating exploitable gaps. Vaughn moved like a shadow through the skeletal remains of the mill, neutralizing guards with precision, sparing lives not from mercy but calculation. Inside, he crept above the command center, listening as Reeves spoke with a subordinate. "Mercer is the priority," Reeves said, his voice cold, precise. "Once he's eliminated, the woman and the child can be found at leisure." The team from Belgrade arrives tomorrow. Vaughn's window was closing. He could not wait. When one guard was lured away by a distraction orchestrated by Vaughn's own team, Vaughn struck. The ceiling gave way and he dropped into the command center, weapon trained on Reeves. The scarred man raised his hands slowly, unfazed. "Calculated risk," Reeves said, entering the lion's den. Their exchange was taut, charged, 2 men shaped by war and shadows, each recognizing the other as both adversary and mirror. Reeves offered terms. Vaughn's life in exchange for Lily's safety. He revealed a dead man's switch, protocols tied to Reeves's regular authentication. If Reeves died or failed to check in, commands would trigger. targeting Lily. Vaughn demanded proof, and Reeves gestured toward a laptop. Vaughn accessed it, finding coordinates already obsolete because he had moved Lily again. Reeves smirked, confident, but Vaughn struck, knocking him unconscious and downloading every file. He called authorities anonymously, leaving Reeves alive, restrained, a black king chess piece toppled beside him. Checkmate. Vaughn disappeared into the storm, carrying the keys to dismantle the remnants of Obsidian once and for all. Chapter 9. Unforgiving. A year later, autumn painted the forests of northern Michigan in fire and gold. Vaughn stood on the deck of his new home, watching Lily laugh as she played with her golden retriever by the lake. Peace seemed possible here, the chaos of the past fading into memory, though never erased. The data he had taken from Reeves's systems had exposed the final network of operatives and safe houses. One by one, with reluctant cooperation from federal agencies, Vaughn had dismantled them. Reeves himself had been tried under extraordinary security measures, sentenced to life without parole, his reach finally severed. Theodore Keller languished in prison, his power gone, his empire reduced to ashes. Bradley had been extracted by Obsidian remnants, only to be executed as a liability. Natalie remained in witness protection, her cooperation valued, her pleas to see Lily growing more insistent. Vaughn had refused. His daughter's safety was his only measure, and Natalie's betrayal was a wound that would never close. Sophia Mendez visited, warning that pressure might come from the Justice Department, that Natalie's advocates argued she had been coerced, that maternal bonds carried weight in court. Vaughn's answer was cold and absolute. If the courts tried to force visitation, he would release the entire trove of Obsidian's government connections, exposing names and operations that could bring down institutions. Mendez paled, understanding the threat was real. Vaughn made his position clear. He had forgiven betrayals, endured assassination attempts, survived lies, but he would never forgive anyone who endangered his child. That evening, he tucked Lily into bed, answering her questions with honesty tailored to her age. She asked about her mother, her grandfather, Bradley, trying to piece together the fragments of truth. Vaughn told her enough to be real, but not enough to scar. "Yes, your mom made bad choices," he admitted, "but she's trying to make better ones now." It was the only truth he could offer without poisoning her memories. After she drifted to sleep, he monitored his systems. Reports confirmed Reeves was locked away, Theodore imprisoned, Natalie hidden, Bradley terminated by his own. For the first time, every loose end seemed tied. But Vaughn knew peace was a fragile illusion. The message of his life had become clear. Threats would always rise, enemies would always circle, but his resolve was eternal. He was Lily's protector, her guardian against the shadows. As her laughter carried across the water the next morning, Vaughn allowed himself to feel the weight of peace, if only for a moment. He had dismantled empires, toppled conspiracies, buried the past in unforgiving ground, yet his vengeance, his love, his purpose remained unshaken. Should anyone ever dare threaten Lily again, they would meet the same truth that Theodore, Bradley, Natalie, and Reeves had all discovered. Vaughn Mercer's justice was patient, his vengeance was absolute, his devotion as a father was merciless. And in this quiet autumn, with his daughter safe at last, that was enough.